Hi, I'm Angelique. I'm a registered dietitian. I hold a master's degree in functional medicine and nutrition. I'm a certified diabetes educator, and I've worked in fitness, personal training for more than 20 years as well. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about gut and muscle health. I am 53 years old and in very, very late perimenopause, I have dealt with my own health issues and helped so many people along the way. I have been blessed to have some wonderful mentors that I've learned from, and I continue to learn from my clients and patients every day. So, why focus on gut and muscle health? Well, we know that there is a certain amount of muscle that we will lose as we age, unfortunately. So, especially with sedentary behavior. So, at around the age 30, we start to lose 3 to 5% of our muscle every decade. And then after the fifth decade, we can lose up to 1% a year if we're not really, really focusing on our gut health, our muscle health. But the thing that's really important about that is that we see a decline in quality of years when we lose muscle health. So we see osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, and many other conditions, including blood sugar dysregulation and diabetes, that come along with losing that muscle health and muscle quality. So you might have heard of a term called anabolic resistance. And this basically describes the blunted stimulation of a signal called muscle protein synthesis. So, this develops with age, and also we can see anabolic resistance happen when there's short successive periods of disuse. Okay. So, for example, somebody gets hospitalized for something, and we can see that this anabolic resistance starts to happen in the muscles when people are unable to use those muscles for whatever reason. So this can lead to a negative net protein balance, meaning we're breaking down more muscle than we're able to build and maintain. And so this drives something called sarcopenia, which is again more of a clinical term that we use when people have lost so much strength and muscle that now, again, really starts to affect their quality of life. The body turns over 300 grams of protein a day. Now, don't worry, I am not saying that you need to eat 300 grams a day, although, ladies, especially my age, we are probably not eating enough unless you're really focusing on your protein and amino acids. We do have this turnover, right? So we are rebuilding ourselves constantly every day. And so there is a turnover of about 300 grams. Now, thankfully, many of these amino acids, they can either be synthesized by our body or reused, recycled. So we don't have to eat all of those amino acids, but we do need to eat a certain amount of them to combat this anabolic resistance. A really important reason to focus on muscle health is for blood sugar regulation, which again is something we see that, gets more of a microscope on it, if you will. People kind of get away with being able to maintain their blood sugars with certain lifestyle when they're younger. And then as they age, they're like, why all of a sudden, I'm doing the same things. Why all of a sudden are my blood sugars increasing? And a lot of this has to do with muscle. So a couple of things I talk about as a certified diabetes educator is, yes, I look at what somebody is eating when I'm looking at their blood sugars and explaining their A1C or their fasting blood glucose. But one thing that people often overlook and don't think about is not just what they're eating to maintain their blood sugar, but also what they're doing with their body. Are they using their muscle? So what you see here in this picture is how we utilize glucose in the blood, how we pull that into the cell. All right. So when we consume glucose, that ends up in the bloodstream. And then insulin is released by the pancreas. Insulin, you can think of it as a key. It binds to the insulin receptor on the cell. So you can see the little red dot there in the picture. It binds to the receptor. And then when it does that, there is a GLUT4 transporter that comes from inside the cell. It comes up to the top of the cell and opens up a little doorway so it can grab the sugar and pull it back into the cell. Okay. So those GLUT4 transporters come up when insulin binds correctly and is able to open up the doorway and pull those GLUT4 transporters up. However, with insulin resistance, those keys don't bind correctly. They're not pulling up the GLUT4 transporters sufficiently. When you are exercising in an exercising muscle, you actually do not need insulin to bind to pull up those GLUT4 transporters. So you are able to pull glucose into a working muscle even without insulin binding. Okay, so this is really, really crucial, because if you have insulin resistance and your keys aren't working very well, then one way to get the glucose to sink into your cell is to move your body before and after exercise. And again, this applies to everybody, not just those with diabetes. We are all working on maintaining healthy glucose control, because having that glucose elevated in your blood is inflammatory. It's oxidative. It's not healthy for us. So we want to have it go into your cell. Plus, you do not get energy from your blood glucose unless it's able to sink into your cell appropriately, right? So muscle does, like we see here on the bottom, it increases the number of those glucose transporters. So the more we exercise and maintain good muscle health, the more of those GLUT4 transporters we're able to recruit. And again, we're able to control our blood sugars that way. It also, you'll see that little mitochondria there in the middle of the slide, that it enhances those mitochondria and the mitochondrial function. So the number of mitochondria that you have, the health of the mitochondria, and when we talk about having good metabolism, we are talking about those mitochondria. We want to have good, healthy mitochondria. This will help us age healthy. It's about the quality of years. And then the other really cool thing about muscle and focusing on muscle health is muscle secretes these factors that have whole body effects. So these factors are called myokines, and myokines are hormone-like peptides that are produced by your myocytes, so your muscle cells. These myokines, they signal to other parts of your body. So they signal to your gut, they signal to your heart, your bones. Your bone health is affected by your muscle health. So say, having strong muscles equals strong bones and vice versa. These myokines signal to your brain. In fact, they are being studied for the prevention and treatment of obesity, because they directly affect both your feeding behaviors, whether you're driven to eat more, and also your energy expenditure. So myokines released by your muscle can affect your metabolism. Again, increasing energy expenditure, the brain gets signals to do that, and the brain also gets signals to decrease appetite, all by these signals that come from your muscle when you use the muscle, when you exercise. So one of these is called BDNF. So when you exercise, lactate, which is produced by the muscle, crosses the blood-brain barrier, gets into the brain, and increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This actually helps with learning, memory, and mood, because it helps with creating new neurons, which are the basis of memory, and it helps with neuroplasticity. So the reorganization of your brain, making your brain more resilient. Now, I don't know about you, but most of us do care about keeping our senses, our cognition, and just having a good mood. I mean, every single day that we're here on the planet, we want to feel our best, right? When we feel our best, we present and show up to the world as our better self. So, muscle, building muscle. Again, we have that 300 grams of protein turnover in a day. We want to promote this signal called muscle protein synthesis, which again, as we age, gets harder for us to do because of that anabolic resistance. So the main driver of this muscle protein synthesis is exercise. Okay, you have to move your body. It could be in little bits. It could be whatever you want, but start to move your body and do that consistently. The other thing we have to have for muscle protein synthesis and for building and maintaining muscle is sufficient amino acids or protein. So again, a certain amount of that needs to come from your diet. What we see is the RDA is set at 0.8 grams per kilogram. This is the minimum to prevent deficiency. It's not the optimum for preventing anabolic resistance or for aging healthy and maintaining that muscle, right? I don't know about you, but I put a lot of work in the gym, and I want to maximize on the work that I am putting in. So ideally, we want to calculate what you're doing. We want to see what you're doing. Where I see people really getting this wrong is breakfast. People think they're doing a high protein breakfast, but we really want to see if we can get a good whack of 30 to 50 grams of protein at breakfast. That'll set you up for your day. Now, what's most important is that you get your total protein in the day. That's the most important factor. But if you're missing it at breakfast, it's going to be really hard with just lunch and dinner to hit your ultimate optimal protein goals. And you want to work with a dietitian or somebody who has experience in helping you understand how to get there, how to calculate it. I like to use people's lean body mass if they have a InBody or a DEXA scan that has estimated their lean body mass. We can use that for calculation. Or we can use something called the ideal body weight chart to calculate how much protein that person needs in the day. But we're looking at building a good muscle-centric and gut-centric plate, which means eating real whole foods. So a plate similar to this that you see here pictured, this will not only give us what we need for our muscle health, but it will also give us what we need for gut health. And why focus on gut health? Because when we focus on gut health, we also decrease inflammation globally all over the body. We help with brain and improving blood sugars and preventing chronic disease and just feeling better throughout the day. So focusing on gut health can be super important for reaching long-term goals. So you've probably heard of the gut microbiome. It's really cool. So when we talk about the gut microbiome, we are talking about specifically the microbes that live in your colon, okay, in that large intestine. So if you take your right hand right now, put it on top of your right hip bone, come up the side of your body, up underneath your rib cage, all the way over, and then down the left side of your body, that's where your large intestine is. And we have these microbes that live in there. We have bacteria, fungi, and yeast. We have these microbes called archaea. These are really cool. They are very ancient microbes that have been on the planet for more than 4 billion years, so longer than we've even had oxygen on the planet, and they live in your gut. We have protozoa and parasites. We have viruses. So yes, it's predominantly bacteria when we talk about the gut microbiome, but we have all of these microbes, and we want to keep them in balance. So the main functions of the gut microbiome, very high level here. They have metabolic functions, meaning they help with digestion and nutrient absorption. They produce this wonderful thing called short chain fatty acids that also cross the blood-brain barrier and decrease inflammation. So again, gut health doesn't stay in the gut, right? It's not Vegas. What happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. And thank goodness for the beneficial effects of that. We have structural and histological functions that the gut does for us. Basically, that means it's helping to modulate the immune system in your gut. 70 to 80% of your immune system actually lives in your gut, and it helps to modulate that. And we have protective functions. So it helps to maintain what's called eubiosis, which is a healthy balance of microbes in your gut. So the number one thing, the number one sign of a healthy gut is diversity. So all researchers agree on that diversity is key for having a healthy gut microbiome. To get diversity in your gut, we need to eat diversity of plant foods. And so focusing on real whole foods, on plants, and even some very anti-inflammatory fats, such as the omega-3s that come from salmon, for example, very helpful in maintaining a good diversity and eubiosis in the gut. When we have this healthy gut microbiome balance, this eubiosis or symbiosis, then we have a healthy gut lining. So as you can see here in this picture, there is that little blue layer, that mucosal layer that lies above those gut cells, right? So we have those single layer of cells that line the gut, and then there's that mucosal layer that lies above that. And that is helping to maintain that barrier. When we have dysbiosis, meaning an overgrowth of the potentially pathogenic guys or the bad microbes that can kind of like overtake things, they eat away at that mucosal layer, and then we eventually can have something called leaky gut, as you see there in that picture, where things will start to get through that gut lining and they trigger that immune system. So they get through into the bloodstream and trigger an inflammatory response from the immune system. So being anti-inflammatory, eating an anti-inflammatory diet means eating for your good gut microbes that help with that good balance and diversity in the gut. When we have a good, healthy gut microbiome and our diet is feeding that diversity, as you can see there in that picture, then you have that eubiosis or symbiosis, right? We have that increase in the beneficial microbes and all the beneficial effects that come with that, with maintaining a healthy state. And vice versa, when we have that standard American diet or SAD, right? Lots of processed foods, but basically the biggest thing about this, that it's lacking plants. That's the biggest thing. It's not so much that the one slice of pizza or the one donut or whatever is going to be that big of a deal for your gut microbiome. It can handle, perturbations, but it needs the plants. All right. So it's not so much what do I need to take out of my diet? People ask that all the time. Should I get rid of meat or wheat or dairy or all the things, right? And there may be a time and a place to examine some of those things. But the main thing that people are not focusing on and that we need to focus on is that we need to add in that diversity of plant foods. And that will help with the overall effects from feeding that good gut microbiome. Prebiotics are essentially fibers, but also they can come from other foods besides fibers. They feed your good microbes, right? So they help to promote that diversity in the gut, that eubiosis. So these are foods that are helpful for your good microbes. They include things like resistant starch and beta-glucan foods, and they can also come from supplements. And there's definitely a time and a place to supplement a prebiotic. And I like to really individualize that with people because there's so many different options and places to start. Now, when we feed our gut microbes that diversity of plant foods, or we give them special prebiotics, then they actually metabolize those prebiotics or that food. Herbs, spices, and teas, by the way, is another great way to promote that diversity in your diet. all those colorful compounds in there. When they metabolize those colorful foods, those plant foods, they produce short chain fatty acids. There's 3 of them: acetate, propionate, and butyrate. The main one that we focus on is butyrate as far as its global effects for us that we get the benefits from. The other ones are important as well. But butyrate, we know, helps to maintain that gut lining, prevents that leaky gut. It decreases inflammation. It's helpful for your brain. Butyrate actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and can help to heal the brain and decrease inflammation in the brain. So just a magical substance that you produce in your gut. There is no single food that you can eat with enough butyrate more than what your gut will produce. Your gut, you want to rely on the butyrate that your gut microbes are producing for you. So no need to waste money on a supplement for butyrate, because you're going to make way more in your gut from feeding your gut microbiome than any other way. Now, probiotics, these are those beneficial microbes. There's a time and a place for probiotics, but you don't always need probiotics, right? So we can supplement probiotics. There's these live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit to the host, and you are the host. So when it comes to probiotics, there's 3 things you want to look at in the name: the genus, the species, and the type or the strain, right? So, these 2 dogs here, they're both dogs, right? They're both Canis familiaris, right? But one is this very big, beautiful dog with a slobbery tongue, and one is this tiny little Chihuahua. So the strain tells us more about what type of dog or what type of probiotic we are looking at. So you want to take the right strain for the right job. More probiotics isn't necessarily better, right? 20 different strains isn't necessarily better. If you need an electrician at your house, you have some electrical work you need done, and a plumber shows up, and a landscaper, and a window cleaner, and a painter, and on, these are all great people. They're all there to do a service for you. But if you need electrical work, doesn't matter how many plumbers show up. It doesn't matter how many people come over to clean your house or paint your house or whatever, right? So you want the right probiotic for the job. And so ideally, when I'm working with people, I start with research probiotic strains specifically for what they are dealing with. All right. So really key factor. And then fermented foods can be wonderful. For most people, unless you have a histamine intolerance, but for most people, eating fermented foods is a great way to get live and active organisms. However, fermented foods do fall short of the definition of a probiotic. Okay, so they do not meet the criteria to be called probiotics. All right, and this is for research purposes because, again, we don't know exactly what strains are in these fermented foods. Again, very beneficial for your gut microbiome, but not necessarily a probiotic with a specific purpose. All right. So lots of things we can do for our gut microbiome. The other thing for gut health that's really, really crucial, and for muscle health, is hydration. Hydration is super key. 60% of your water, 60% of your body is made up of water, and super important for your muscles to fire correctly and efficiently. So we need hydration. We also need hydration to move our bowels daily and completely, okay? So very, very crucial. The one way to figure out if you're getting enough hydration is to track it. See what you're doing. There is no one way to calculate how much hydration you need. So many factors play into it, including altitude and medications and just so many different things. So an estimate of how much hydration you might need is your body weight in kilograms. So if you know your body weight in pounds, divide that by 2.2. That is the amount of ounces you want to aim for in the day. All right. And that includes any hydration that might come from food. So hydrating, eating your plant foods, eating sufficient protein. Hydration and the plant foods especially are going to help with bowel movements and bowel movement regularity. Now, the reason I'm coming to this is because this is the number one reason for gas and bloating. All right. If you have gas and bloating, you're likely not moving your bowels every single day. Or if you are moving your bowels every single day, you're not moving them completely. Okay. So being regular means moving your bowels 1 to 3 times a day, soft formed, easy to pass. They're in control. You're not rushing. You're not straining. And it's a complete evacuation. All right. If you have ever seen the Bristol stool chart, this is a validated research tool. We look at this to see where you're at. Where do you fall on the Bristol stool chart from 1 to 7? Anywhere from 3 to actually 5 can be normal depending on the person. But 4 is ideal. So what we're looking for is to get to a number 4, but we're also looking that it's complete. And you can do a little N of 1 colon transit time research study on yourself. And you can do this anytime to check in, especially if you go on vacation or whatever, and you're like, oh, I don't think things are exactly where they need to be. Eat a half a cup to 3/4 a cup of corn. Eat it only one time. And then notice when you see it moved out in your bowels. All right. A lot of people will see it the next day. They're like, cool, I see my corn. I must be good. But then guess what? They'll see it day 2. They'll see it day 3. They're like, oh my goodness, I only ate this corn that one time. And yes, they saw it the next day. So they thought they were good and they're moving their bowels every day. But if you continue to see it, you didn't move your bowels completely, right? So just again, a little way for you to assess what's going on with you. Some helpful foods that you can include. Kiwi, my favorite. It's a low FODMAP, meaning it's easy to digest and absorb, even for my IBS patients. And so eating 1 to 2 kiwis a day can be super helpful for gently moving your bowels. And again, other foods and specific probiotic strains that can be used. For example, the probiotic strains that are both in Nancy's and Activia, they have 2 different ones. Those are helpful for moving your bowels. So a muscle and gut health focused plate is real whole food, is basically what that is. And what we want to look at is how to incorporate this. So this just becomes part of your lifestyle, right? That eating these good, healthy foods just becomes part of your lifestyle. And one way to do that is to journal it. So you have to create some awareness, like, what am I really doing, right? And it has to be consistent. So just looking at like how much hydration, how much protein, how much diversity in plants, how much physical activity, am I getting those myokines moving, right? So creating awareness, there's many ways to do that. I like to use a Cronometer as far as a digital tool. It's really cool. It syncs with your Apple or Samsung or other devices. It tells you how much hydration and fiber and even all the micronutrients, right? So all those vitamins, making sure that you're getting those in your diet. So really cool app that I use when I work with people. In fact, when you are working with me, you get free access to Cronometer Gold, so you can pay attention to what's going on with you, if you choose. If you don't like the digital, we can always do paper, pen, good old fashioned, whatever way you choose, right? So the program that is coming up starting January 30th, this is a weekly program. We meet once to kick it off, and then we meet every week for 6 weeks. All right. So we look at gut health, we look at muscle health, and we look at maintaining sustainable habits. So using behavior change science to implement the things that are important for both gut health and muscle health. So if you'd like to sign up, I would love to have you. I would love to go into more depth on some of these things. I'd love to answer all your questions and work with you. evernourishedwellness.com is where you can sign up for this 6-week gut and muscle reset program. I'm excited to work with you. Please check it out. I hope to see you there.